Thank you so much. First of all, I want to apologize to everyone that I can't be there with you in person today. Unfortunately, COVID had other plans for me, but I really want to say a huge thank you to Eva and Anita for facilitating my being able to join you remotely. So at least I can still be a part of this really amazing initiative today. So I'm just going to start. Okay, so obviously I'll start off with my knowledge question. So I may need a little bit of help from someone in the room just to see what the answers to these questions are. But the question that I would like to pose to you off the top of the presentation today is, in a recent survey on the public trust in scientific information, which group of people were found to be the most trusted to provide credible information? So this was actually a survey that was done in 2020. So obviously a couple of things have changed in the last couple of years, but the answer to this is something that I'd like to come back to during my talk. So the first answer is industry experts. Does people think industry experts were the most trusted to provide credible information? I think this is, I can't really tell. I can see a portion of the room, but I'm guessing that's a no. How about academic experts? Oh, I see a few hands going up for academic experts. Oh, a lot of hands. Okay, great. How about a person just like you being the most trusted to provide credible information? Maybe a couple, yes. How about a journalist? Yes, a very strong hand in the front there. This is excellent. Okay, and then a member of government. So this was a question that was asked internationally. So obviously different countries have different interpretations of government. So this was just generically a member of government. And I don't really see any hands going up for that one, unfortunately. Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, so I think the majority of people from my assessment of what I could see in the room voted for an academic expert being the most popular choice. And I'll come back to the answer to this one a little bit later on, because it is kind of interesting. You are mostly correct, though, I will say. A lot of people did choose something to do with an expert, but the answer is a little bit more complicated than just that. So I really wanted to talk to you today about geoscience in public conversations. And this is obviously a very, very large and all-encompassing topic that is impossible to cover in just 10 minutes. And so today is obviously going to be a very, very short snapshot, but one thing I really want to do is echo basically all of Anjana's talk, because the points that she made are excellent and absolutely appropriate. And I'm really going to be picking up on a couple of those and adding to them, because she's absolutely correct. Storytelling is exactly what we need in these kind of circumstances. But I often start talks when I'm thinking about geoscience in public conversations by saying that one of the things, if anyone has ever engaged with a public conversation about geoscience, you've probably started off by hearing this in response to anything that you say. To someone who is not trained in geosciences, or who hasn't worked in geosciences, or who has no previously understood experience, they don't know themselves to be an enthusiast, they'll often start by saying, I don't know anything about geology, I have no connection with it. And this is a very common thing that people will hear when you're talking with people in the geosciences realm, because, as Anjana said, it's often perceived to be something that's very alien and inaccessible to a lot of people. As a subject, it's complicated. It has lots of different parts that intersect. And also the way that we interact with a lot of science subjects, for most people, this will be through school initially. Geology and geoscience and the earth sciences are often hidden within various different subjects. So when we start to interrogate this a little bit more, I did a survey a long time ago asking people, what is the most common word that you associate with geology? The idea that people come up with right off the bat is obviously rocks. And a number of these other words came up in this survey as well. Most of them focused around single concepts or ideas linked to things like facts about the geosciences. And when you look at this list of like words, you can maybe start to understand why someone who doesn't have any kind of like knowledge of their own interaction with geology could think that they don't have any connection with this subject. If you ask someone who is not a geoscientist to explain something like this, there's an instant barrier in access to the facts behind it. But one of the things that I would counter that with always in every circumstance is that the problem with something like this, and this was a survey that was done of people that were geoscience experts, people that had geoscience interest, and people that had no interest in geoscience whatsoever, is that these are ideas that are disconnected from any kind of context. And the reality of geoscience, as Anjana has just said, is all about context. It's all about story. It's all about our connection to the earth. Because the way that we use, interpret, and access geological concepts depends on our training and experiences, both scientifically and personally. This is because we filter absolutely everything that we do through our own personal lenses, whether we have been trained in geoscience or not. It doesn't matter. We still filter the world through our own backgrounds and experiences. And this is really useful when thinking about communicating about geoscience, because another big important point to pick up on is one of the things that I've said straight off the bat in this talk today is already wrong. It's the idea that there is one public that you can talk to, that you can have a conversation with the public. You can't. The public is so divided into so many different groups of people, how interested in science they are, how they access their science information, the way that they interact with that data and what it means to them. And there's so many different surveys that look at the way that we divide our publics up. This is one of the most common ones that is used in Europe to think about how enthusiastic people are about science. And when you're communicating science, generally the people that you're communicating to are the people that are really interested in it, or maybe those top two categories that you can see in this chart here, the science files and the critically interested. The people that you will probably want to be communicating with are the passive supporters and the disengaged. They can be very difficult to get in touch with because the thing that they are interested in is not necessarily science, but their own values, the things that they value, the things that they think are important. And so as a geoscientist, you can look at this issue and you can say, well, if someone's not interested in geology already, how do I connect to them? How do I meet them where they are and have this conversation about a topic, as we heard earlier this morning, on things that are critically essential for everyone in society, not just decision makers, not just educators, but literally everyone in society needs to have some engagement with these concepts. So this was something that I was particularly interested in. And so I did an investigation in a local area in Cornwall, which has already been mentioned this morning with the geothermal topics that are being studied there. So there's a lot of interest in this area because I was interested in how, when a geoscientist talks to someone without taking these value systems into account, how there can be a miscommunication. If you try and have this conversation with someone without figuring out who they are first, you can just lose the conversation right off the bat. So I was asking this question in a more complex way, this idea of what are these ideas? How do you talk about these ideas? And I asked a group of experts and a group of non-experts. And one of the things that I found that was really interesting was the way that experts talk about concepts that exist in the geological subsurface. So how rocks are made and formed, how they, the properties they have, the structure of the earth, how things interact in the subsurface environment was something that was discussed in a very different way if you were a non-expert. There was a huge gap in the way that these two groups of people were talking about these concepts. But the thing that was really interesting to me was that in this particular location in Cornwall, the way that people talked about geoscience in the landscape, the visible aspects of geoscience, the parts of geoscience that connect with culture and heritage and history, there was a really strong match between the experts and the non-experts in the way that they talked about these concepts. And this is really useful for us as geoscientists to understand that if we're going to be having a conversation with someone and we're not quite sure what the best way is to engage with them, starting in the landscape in this particular area, engaging with local culture, with local heritage, exactly as Anjana has just said, is the key way to connect to these people's values and start this conversation. Now, one of the things that I also wanted to pick up on is that as another facet of this, diversity in geoscience at all levels is critical, because when you are engaging with someone on a geoscience subject and you're using value to have this conversation, something that's really important is to be able to share that value with someone. And this is a major kind of point of conversation in all science communication at the moment, but particularly around climate science and geoscience, is the idea that the best way to connect with someone is to share values with them. And that's not going to be true for everybody. I am not a particularly religious person, and so I cannot connect my values to someone who is very religious. And so for me, it's important to find people that I can connect to that share my background and my values and my experience, and I can talk to them about geoscience. But I cannot talk to everyone about geoscience. I cannot connect my I cannot connect my values to everyone else's values because I am not the same. And so it's really important that we foster a diversity of people that are engaging with geoscience subjects, not just diversity of genders, but a diversity of backgrounds and experiences, of ability and access issues. The number of different people engaged in our subject need to be incredibly diverse because society is incredibly diverse, and we need to help these people to have someone to connect to. Because even a little bit of familiarity with the geoscience subject allows you to act with it as an interpreter and connect your values and the values that you share with your community to the facts and to the information that you want to share and get out there. This is really, really important to say. So I want to come back to the point that I made earlier, that one of the increasing reasons why this is so important is when we look at this idea, who is credible? Who do you trust for information? Here's the answer to that question, that actually in this survey in 2020 that looked at not just specific science subjects, but kind of conversations around information that was in the technical realm, the most trusted groups of people were industry experts and academic experts to provide credible information. The next most trusted group of people was someone like yourself. Now, this is really interesting because it points to the fact that if we don't have a diversity of people that are filling these roles of industry experts and academic experts, then relying on people that are just like you to get your information also means that you may not be getting that information from someone who has much interaction with geoscience. If you are from a marginalized group and you're not part of our like a larger access to geoscience, how are you getting that information? How are you accessing this? We need to make sure that all of these groups that we're integrating with, the industry experts, academic experts, and just people in society, have had some experience of geoscience so that we can diversify the way that people are able to engage and interact with the subject. So I want to leave it with just one point, that geoscience communication is about so much more than just facts. It's about our shared values. And if you want to make connections with people, you have to use values in order to do this, in order to make them feel comfortable enough to engage with the subject, ask questions, and provide their own information and background. And in order to do this, diversity is essential in earth sciences. As anyone who has some training in this, and this is not just at university level, this is at secondary school level or even primary school level, these people go on to have lots of different roles in society because there needs to be lots of ways to engage with geoscience. So thank you very much, and I will hand the microphone back to the room.